Can I grab onto anything in this space? This space is the space where you had all of your plans, you had your vision, you had your dreams for the future, and they all get taken away. And you find yourself in this space. And this is a space that I hate. Say it with me now. I hate this space. I hate this space. Don't you hate this space? This space sucks. And we're kind of all in this space right now, aren't we? This is what COVID space looks like. Hey everybody, welcome. My name's Pete. I'm one of the lead pastors here at Creekside, and you're joining us in the middle of a series that we're calling In the Waiting. And it's a series about waiting, it's a series about patience, and it's a series that we're doing in this time called Advent, which is a season that the church gets into right before Christmas, where we enter into this spirit of waiting and this practice and this discipline of being patient. And last week what I talked about, to kind of kick off the series, was this idea of patience being beautiful. And moving beyond patience as just being something that we rigidly do because we know that God calls us to be patient and we want to be patient, and so we just do it, but instead stepping back and saying, what even is patience? And so I talked about how patience is beautiful, how patience puts us in right relationship with God and ourselves and creation and the other people around us, and ultimately being a patient person leads us into a life of peace. But today what I want to talk about is something more specific. And it's more specifically about what it means to be patient with God. What does it mean to make room for God? And I want to talk about a particular space that God often calls us into where we have to be patient. And if we don't learn how to embrace this space, if we don't learn how to be in this space, then we'll never have the peace that patience can give us while we're in this space. And the space that I'm referring to is called liminal space. I don't know if you've heard that word before. Maybe poke the person next to you. You ever heard of liminal space? What is Pete just making up words now? What is this? It's called liminal space. Liminal is a Latin word. It means in the threshold. So think of it this way, that liminal space is the space when you're in between rooms. Like you're in between, like you're in a doorway of a room, like the threshold in a room. And so what I want to talk about is liminal space being the space in between what was and what's next. Liminal space is when you are no longer where you used to be, and you're on your way to somewhere else, but you're not there yet. And so you're in the threshold. It's like you're in between two rooms, and you're no longer in the room where you used to be, but you're not in the room where you're heading next. You're in between. This is called liminal space, and God often calls us into this kind of space. Maybe you feel like you're in that space right now. Maybe you've been there before. Sometimes you feel it like when you're done school, like when you graduate high school, when you finish a semester, when you graduate university or college, and you're like, what is next? Like I'm done with that. Like I graduated, but I don't know like what my next, I don't know if I'm going to have a job. Like I don't know, am I going to still live with my parents? Am I going to move in with some roommates? Or am I going to live? What city am I going to be in? And you feel this kind of like, I'm in this like waiting space, and I don't know what's next, but I've left what was. Maybe you felt this because your job situation has changed. Maybe you've lost your job recently. Maybe you felt called to leave the job that you're in, and so you've left what was. You've been forced to leave what was, and you're not quite at what's next, and so you're in this middle space. You're in this space between. You're in this liminal space. Maybe some of you have felt like you've been in this space before when it comes to relationships. Maybe you broke up with someone or they broke up with you. Maybe your marriage fell apart. And so you used to kind of have an idea of like what next is going to be. Next is going to be with this person. And we had these dreams and these plans. And suddenly that just got like deleted. Just got erased. And yet you're no longer in what was, and you don't even know what's next anymore. Now you're in liminal space. You're in this space between of not knowing. It's this space of uncertainty. It's this space of like, I don't know what's coming next. Maybe you're in this space because you lost somebody recently. You lost somebody and you had envisioned your future together. You had envisioned retirement together. And suddenly that got taken away. And so what you had envisioned was going to be next is gone, and what was is gone, and you're in the middle, and you're trying to build like a whole new life for yourself. And you're like, God, where are we going? Like, can I grab onto anything in this space? This space is the space where you had all of your plans, you had your vision, you had your dreams for the future, and they all get taken away. And you find yourself in this space. And this is a space that I hate. Say it with me. I hate this space. I hate this space. You know why? This space is a space that COVID dragged all of us into. And it's the worst. It's the worst. We've all been dragged into this space of like what was has been like blown up and what was going to come next. We don't know what's coming next. And we're all in this liminal space together. I hate this space because you know what I want? I don't want there to be like a space in between. I want it to be like this. Why can't God work like this? Hey, look, there we go. Why can't we just move these things together? God is God. Why can't he do it like that? And so why can't I be in what was with my comfort and my assurance of how things are going to be, and I have like a sense of control over things, and then God goes, oh, I have what's next for you. Would you like to step into that? And you go, oh, I would love to step into that next. Oh, perfect. Thank you, God. That was so easy. Why doesn't God do it this way? What I've found throughout my life and in studying the scriptures is that God doesn't work like that. God works like this. God works this way, that we are in a place of comfort. We're in a place where we have like some illusion of control. We kind of know this space. We feel safe here. And then God calls us out of this space, but he doesn't give us all the answers. He doesn't give us all the details. He doesn't give us like an insurance policy. Let me just tell you that everything's going to be great for you. Instead, he just says, you want to just leave that space and walk with me? And we have to live in this middle space before we get to see what the next thing fully is. I found that this is how God works. And if we want to walk with him, if we want to be in right relationship with him, if we want to experience the peace of being in this space, if we want to have peace in this space, then we have to learn to be patient, and we have to learn how to embrace this space and see it not as an anomaly, not as like something's gone terribly wrong, but see it as, no, this is actually normal. This is how God works. And so to do that today, I want to look at two stories that we find in the scriptures, two Christmas stories. So we're going to go to Luke chapter 1, and Luke gives us two stories of two different people that are called from what was into this liminal space, and we're going to see how they have two very different reactions. The first story is about a man named Zechariah, and Zechariah is a priest, and he gets this amazing honor that he's going to be the one that's going to go offer burnt incense in the temple. This would be something that would only happen to him ever once in his life, if he even got the opportunity to do it once. So this is a very special moment for Zechariah. And so his whole priestly division would have like moved closer to the temple during this time, and he would have been like away from his family, and he was going to get ready to do this amazing role. And Luke tells us something really interesting about Zechariah. It says that he and his wife were unable to have children, and that they were very, very long in age. They were very old, which is kind of like this. So he's an old man, and he's had his whole life of like, I hope I can have a son, hope I can have a daughter, I hope we can build a family, and that's never happened for him. And Luke tells us like, and by the way, he's really old, so it's probably not going to happen for him. And he gets called to do this amazing thing where he's going to get to burn this incense at this altar in the temple. And while he does that, all the people of Israel will be outside, and they'll all be praying. And it was this thing that they did twice a day where they would offer their prayers up to God. They would offer their prayers up. It was a sin offering. It was a way that they would be reconciled with God. And so his role as the priest would be to kind of like symbolically bring all of the prayers of the people and offer them up to God. And the major prayer, like everyone would have their individual prayers, like he would have had his prayer of hope for kids, but he also would have had like the prayer of the nation, which was, would you free us from the Romans? Like, would you put our nation back on top? Would you give us a new king? God, would you show up and move the way that the prophets prophesied that you would? And so Zechariah goes into this holy space with these two kind of prayers on his mind, the prayers of the nation, but also the prayers of his own heart. And this is what it says happens to him while he's in this holy space. It says, then an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was gripped with fear. But the angel said to him, do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John. He will be a joy and a delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth, for he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He is never to take wine or other fermented drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he's born. He will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God, and he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and the power of Elijah to turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. So Zechariah goes into the altar. He goes into this holy space. He offers up these prayers, and suddenly an angel appears. And the angel's like, don't be afraid. And the angel tells him something amazing is going to happen, which is a fulfillment of both of his prayers. That God is beginning to move in the world, and that he is going to have a son, and that this son will be the forerunner of the Messiah that is to come. It's this amazing moment that Zechariah should have been like, yes! Instantly, I had these two prayers, they went up, and then immediately as soon as the prayers went up, God sent a messenger down to be like, both your prayers are answered. And instead, Zechariah says this, he asks the angel, how can I be sure of this? Because I'm an old man and my wife is well along in years. The angel said to him, I am Gabriel, and I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to tell you this good news. And now you are going to be silent and not able to speak until the day that this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time. This amazing moment of your prayers are going to be answered. Zechariah's like, hang on, how can I be sure? Which you could maybe read that different ways, but the angel interprets what was going on in his heart for us. The angel says, you're going to be quiet now because you did not believe. So his question was rooted in disbelief. He didn't want to trust the angel's words. When I think about this story in the context of this kind of imagery, I think of Zechariah being in this place. And for so much of his life, he hoped that God would bring him into what's next. For so much of his life, he was like, I'm ready, God. Like, I'm ready for me and my wife, Elizabeth, to have a family. I'm ready. Like, bring me in there. I'm ready for you to send a Messiah. I'm ready for our people to move on. I'm ready. And then at some point, he got old enough that he stopped believing that there was a next. And he just had like this death grip on what was. And when the angel comes to tell him, hey, we're moving on from what was, and we're going to start moving into what's next. But in order to get there, you're going to have to take some steps of faith. You're going to have to take some steps of trust in order to get there. Zechariah's like, I don't know if I want to do that. It's been too long. Like I'm too old to go on that journey. I wonder if he was thinking about like, you want me to go home and tell my wife, who's maybe 80 at this point, that we're going to have kids? Do you know what that's going to do to her if that doesn't come true? Do you know how many times we've offered up prayers and we got pregnant and then the baby didn't make it? Do you know what it's going to feel like for me to go home and tell her that? You got to tell me how we're going to get to what's next. You got to give me some assurance of like, how is this going to happen? And the angel says, that's not how God works. So instead, I'm going to drag you into this liminal space. And while you're in this liminal space, you won't be able to speak for 9 months until the baby is born. Luke gives us this first reaction of this man named Zechariah being pulled into liminal space. And then right after that, he tells us another story about how an angel comes to a young woman named Mary. Mary was maybe 13 years of age. And she's engaged and she's excited to be married. She comes from an important family, so she had this status. She's going to be married, and so she probably had all these plans about what is next in my life. She was living with probably all these dreams of like, oh, I'm going to marry Joseph, we're going to have a home, and we're going to start a family, and I know exactly kind of how my life is going to play out because it's going to be very similar to how all of my relatives and their lives played out. And then one day, the angel comes to Mary, and this is what Luke says. It says, the angel went to her and said, greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you. Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this must be. But the angel said to her, do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus. He will be great, and he'll be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over Jacob's descendants forever. His kingdom will never end. Mary then says words very similar to what Zechariah says, and yet the angel doesn't discipline her for these words, because the words are spoken from a place of faith, from a place of trust. So Mary says, how will this be since I am a virgin? The angel answered, the Holy Spirit will come upon you and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the Holy One to be born will be called the Son of God. Even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a child in her old age. And she who was said to be unable to conceive is in her 6th month. For no word from God will ever fail. And then Mary gives this beautiful answer. Mary's in the same place that Zechariah was. Mary has an idea of like what was. I know what it's like to live here. I know what's coming next. I'm going to marry Joseph, and we have plans and we have dreams for the future. And the angel breaks in and says, I got a whole other plan. And I'm wondering if you want to be a part of that. Like, I'm wondering if you want to be a part of what God's going to do. But in order to do that, what was next is not going to look anything like what you were planning. What's going to come next is going to be this liminal space. And Mary gives this beautiful answer. She says, I am the Lord's servant. May your word to me be fulfilled. I am the Lord's servant. Who am I? Who am I to say anything to God? I am the Lord's servant. May it be to me as you have said. May your word to me be fulfilled. I picture these words and this imagery, and I picture them as it's like the angel in playing the God character, or like a representative of God, is like reaching out his hand and inviting Mary to step into this liminal space. And Mary so gracefully just says, okay, I will let go of what was, and I don't know exactly what's coming next. Like, I have a vague idea, but I'll live in this middle space. And then for 9 months, Mary would have had to go through what it was like constantly explaining to people, oh, no, I know me and Joseph weren't married and we have this baby, but the baby's actually from God and it's actually the promised Messiah. So don't worry about that. Like, imagine explaining that for 9 months and the whole time wondering, like, was that a dream? Was that a weird dream? Like, am I making all this up? Am I going crazy? Do I really have a baby? And then the baby finally comes, and then what? Oh, then I get to go to what's next. Well, not really. Then there's 30 or so years of waiting for Jesus to actually even begin his ministry. Mary gets invited into this liminal space that lasts for so long, and yet I think that she handled it so well because of how easily and gracefully she stepped into it. Who am I? I mean, who am I to question God in all of this? I'm God's servant. I've trusted him my whole life. I'm going to continue to trust him even in this moment, and I'll step into this space and live in the uncertainty and the discomfort that comes with this space. Luke, at the beginning of his gospel, gives us these two images. And what I think he's trying to help us to see is that the ability to have peace in this space comes from our trust in God. It comes from trust, like the ability, like patience as the ability to be in discomfort without losing our peace. Patience as the ability to be in discomfort without losing our peace. Where does that come from? Where does that ability come from? It comes from our ability to trust. It comes from our willingness to, when Jesus reaches out his hand and says, will you leave all of this certainty and will you follow me? That we just say, yeah, I will, because I trust you. Because who am I other than ultimately your servant? Which is why Mary's response is so beautiful. Some people say it this way, that Mary's response, that she's the first person in the Bible to say yes to Jesus. She's the first person to say yes to Jesus. She says, yes, Jesus, come and literally like take up residence inside of me. She's the first one to say yes to Jesus. And by doing that, she gives us an example of what it will mean to follow Jesus. The Jesus who will eventually grow up and become a man and walk all around the Galilee and all around Jerusalem and all around Judea. And what will he do? He'll just constantly extend his hand and he'll say, hey, do you want to trust me? God's doing something new in the world. It looks nothing like what you had in mind. I know you guys thought what was next, what it would look like, but it's not going to look anything like that. But I'm just inviting, would you leave what was? And would you trust me? I think this is just a beautiful image of what it means to follow Jesus, of what it means to walk with God. But in order to do this, we have to be willing to trust him. And we have to be willing to embrace this space that requires a daily kind of patience as we walk with God. And so, like I said before, we're in this time of COVID. We're in this time of COVID where everything that was, almost everything, has been stripped away. And what the future holds is a little bit shadowy at the moment. And yet I don't think God is intimidated by any of it. I don't think he was caught off guard by any of it. And I think what he wants to do is continue to invite us to trust him, to learn to be patient in this place, and to discover that we can actually find peace. Even when we're not clinging to what was or know exactly what's coming next, we can find peace here if we can learn to trust him. And so maybe today what God is inviting you to do is just take a step. Maybe what he's inviting you to do is just take a step out of this space of what was. And you've been clinging to it. You've been like, no, I know, I want to get back to what was. I don't want to leave what was. And the whole time God's like, yeah, but I want to bring you somewhere else. I want to bring you somewhere I can help you grow, where I can teach you something new. I want you to walk with me. And we're like, yeah, but what's the next thing? And he's like, I don't want to tell you that. I want you to walk with me and just trust that what's next will be good. And that what's next will be okay, because I'll be with you as you get there. I love when angels show up to humans. And in this story, it happens twice. And both times, the angel says the same thing to lead off. He says, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. And I used to read that as, clearly the angel says, don't be afraid, because it was a freaky thing for an angel to show up. And it would be a freaky thing for an angel to show up right now. That would be like, oh my, whoa, like there's a presence in the room. Maybe there's bright lights. Maybe it's loud. Who knows? But I used to think of it just that way. And now I wonder if maybe part of the reason why the angel says, don't be afraid, is because the angel knows that he is about to rock this human's world. He's about to do this to this poor little human. He's about to pull this human out of what they know, out of the certainty and comfort of what they know, and invite them on this journey that it could be really scary to do. It could be really scary to leave all of that and trust God. And so the angel says, don't be afraid. I'm going to call you into something that is big. It's so much bigger than you, and your natural inclination is going to be afraid. But I want to tell you right off the bat, you have nothing to fear, because you're going to be walking with God the whole time. And I love that, because I think often we should be afraid before the angel shows up. We should be afraid here before God shows up. We should be afraid here because in this place we think, okay, I've got everything under control. I know how things are going to line up. And it's a little bit of like, I know how to fix the world. I know how to fix me. Like I've got everything under control. And yet we don't. And so we should be longing for God to show up. And when God shows up, our inclination shouldn't be to be afraid. It should be, oh, thank goodness I don't have to be afraid anymore. Now that God is here, I don't have to be afraid anymore. And so maybe what God is inviting you to do today, if you're that person that has like a death grip on what was, you can't wait to get back to what was, maybe your action step today is just to take a step and reach out and take God's hand and let him lead you into this liminal space. Or maybe you just need to take a breath. Maybe you're already in liminal space and you just need to breathe. Oh, we forget to breathe. We forget to breathe deep. Just breathe right now. If there's someone with you right now, be like, okay, we're actually going to breathe. I know like people on TV, they say breathe and then we don't breathe. We just pretend like they can't see us. I could see you right now. Take a breath. Maybe you're in this space. You just need to breathe. Maybe you just need to breathe. Maybe you got dragged into this space. We all kind of got dragged into this space, right? COVID kind of dragged us here. We didn't even really choose to get here. We're kind of like Zechariah. Zechariah doesn't choose to enter into liminal space, and yet the angel's like, well, you're coming with me. And what I love is that the angel, it's like the angel disciplines him by saying, you will not speak for 9 months. You're not going to speak again until your son is born. And if you look at the words that Zechariah speaks in the text, the words that he speaks to the angel are words of doubt. They are words of a lacking of trust. And then after he speaks those words of doubt, he doesn't speak again until his son is born. And his next words are words of faith, where he writes down, he says, my son's name is John, which is an echo of what the angel told him, which is a sign that he now believes what the angel told him. And so it's almost like the angel disciplines him and says, you know what, you've been talking too much. You know what's going to be good for you is to not talk for 9 months. That's the antidote that you need. I'm going to pull you into liminal space. I'm going to pull you into this space where you're going to have to learn how to trust God, and you're going to learn to trust him by just being quiet. Maybe that's you. Maybe you've been talking too much, telling people the same stories over and over about how hard COVID's been. I know I have the same conversations over and over about COVID, and I can't wait to I don't want to have those conversations anymore. I don't want to keep explaining what it's been like to move to Waterloo during COVID and all that. I just want to be done with that. I just sense that maybe God's just saying to some of us, just be quiet. Just take a breath. Learn how to be in this space with me. Or maybe you chose to be in this space. And you're like Mary, you gracefully entered into this space, and you just need a reminder today that this is normal. You just need a permission today to realize, like, yeah, this is how God works. I don't get to cling to comfort all the time, and I don't always get to have a perfect crystal ball view of what the future is. And yet that's okay. So maybe today you just need to take a breath. And then lastly, maybe you feel like you've been in this space for a really long time. And it's one thing to read like a Bible story where everything gets resolved within a couple of minutes because you just keep reading and, the happy ending's on its way. But you feel like, I took the step. I jumped into the space. I got dragged into the space. And now it's been years. And it feels dark. And what it feels like is that I'm alone, and it feels like nothing is happening. You ever feel that, like nothing is happening? When things are moving, when I can see progress, I can have hope, I can trust in God, and yet when things seem to stall out and stand still, that's when it really is hard. And maybe that's where you're at today. And if that's where you're at, then we have a song for you. We have a song that we want to sing over you today, and the song is called Your Nature. And I want to read for you just the first verse of this song because you probably haven't heard it before. It's a kind of a new song. But the words of the first verse of this song go like this. You bring life to the barren places, light to the darkest spaces. God, it's your nature. You bring joy to the brokenhearted, hope to the ones who've lost it. God, it's your nature. What this song is a reminder of is who God is. That even in the darkest places, God has proven himself to be faithful. And so we want to sing this song over you today, that God is one who always brings life, who always brings hope, who always brings light. And we hope that this song will do that for you if you're in this place and you're wondering, like, where is God? It can be a reminder to you that he will be faithful because it's in his nature. And so may you let go. May you take a step. May you take a breath. May you feel his peace today. And may you come to know that you can trust him in the waiting.
To the barren places, light to the darkest spaces, God. It's your nature. You bring joy to the broken-hearted, hope to the ones who've lost it, God. It's your nature. There is no desert that your streams can't run to. There are no ruins that your love won't make new. You tell the wasteland that it will bloom again, 'cause it's your nature. You will restore the years that shame has stolen. You keep the promises that you have spoken. I know this wasteland will be whole again, 'cause it's your nature. You bring peace to the war inside us, speak, and all fear is silenced. It's your nature. joy to the broken-hearted. Oh, to the